Well, we have a world traveler in the Rebel. His name is Keean Bexte. He's been to places as far afield as Hong Kong and Madrid. Today, he is in a town called Smithers, British Columbia, and it is cold there. He joins us from the warmth of his hotel room. It's too cold outside. Keean, how you doing out there?
I'm very cold.
You know what? The whole country is cold, so you have our commiserations. We like to film you out on the scene when you were in Hong Kong, when you were in Madrid, and you were definitely out on the scene up to your knees in snow in Smithers. Here, let's play a clip of how some of that went down.
In a white pickup closer down by the highway, where that I don't know whether they're doing a log sort yard there on the side of the road or whatever.
Yeah, what I would suggest is you guys just go and then maybe come back later in the night.
Okay, it's quarter after 12 now. You know what?
Could I just pop out, grab some footage?
No footage. Yeah, just talk to the hereditaries down there before you come up. Maybe you can have a
There was no hereditary. Would they meet us up there?
You'll be able to identify them. It's part of your independent reporter. You're going to want to speak to them.
Okay, so are they going to be down at 27? Like I said, we just came through there. There's nobody there but three RCMP cars.
Do some investigating, and I'm sure you'll come across them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. Could I ask one question before we go? You guys are using tires and gasoline. Is that hypocritical at all, given that you want to stop a pipeline?
No, we're directing you to the hereditary chiefs now, so you can go.
All right. All right.
Well, all right. Thanks for your time.
Just wait here.
Well, that wasn't very friendly. Keean, you can be a pretty friendly guy, but they weren't having any of it. I've been to Smithers and Terrace and other good places like that. I think they're pretty welcoming. I have a theory, Keean, that you weren't dealing with real folks from Smithers. I happen to know that the pipeline they're protesting, the Coastal GasLink, it's a $6 billion natural gas pipeline, part of a $40 billion LNG fracking. I mean, it's the biggest project in Canada. I happen to know that all 20 out of 20 Indian bands along the route of the pipe not just want it, but have signed contracts to work on it, have filed affidavits in court to kick out those ragamuffins blocking it. So I know that those protesters don't speak for folks in the region. Tell me what else you saw and what you learned when you were up there, because not a lot of real journalists have gone there.
Yeah, so we were the second journalist on the scene. The RCMP just started, just created this process to allow journalists through. We approached the RCMP checkpoint, which was at kilometer 27 of the road. And once we met with them, we showed them our journalism badges that we have at the Rebel, and we showed them our ID, and we showed them what our purpose was going there. Then they called that up to what they called their Silver Command, and then their Silver Command decided whether or not we would be allowed through. And they graciously allowed us to go through and speak one-on-one with these protesters. And again, yeah, we were the second in the entire country to be allowed past this RCMP checkpoint, which I thought was pretty cool. Once we got to the checkpoint, though, we were a little bit disappointed, and my security detail was very antsy. He didn't want me to get out of the car, and right when things looked like they were heading south, he kind of hightailed it out of there. He was driving the truck, so I was at his beck and call. At his whims. I would have rather to stay. Maybe he wasn't having any of it. What I did find, though, and what was really interesting, is that these protesters are using two deadly tools to dissuade people from coming forward, and it's something called a widowmaker and something called a tire bomb. Tire bomb is pretty self-explanatory. It's tire filled with gasoline-soaked rags. to be lit on fire when they need it. And the widowmakers are trees that are sawn halfway through that can be tipped over with just a gust of wind at an unsuspecting police officer who is patrolling the area, or even a journalist or a car. Who knows? They're hidden, and it's a tactic that they're using to scare and intimidate police, and it is possibly lethal. My security detail, he was ex-RCMP, ex-military, and he knows these widowmakers well, and he was very scared of them, driving very slowly through the bush, peering at tree bottoms to make sure that one wasn't going to fall on us as we approached the encampment. What was very interesting, on top of all of that, was when we reached the encampment and spoke to them. It wasn't really who I thought it would be. There was two white guys. One white guy was taking a picture of the vehicle from 360 degrees with a really, really nice camera. And then he hightailed it back to the hut, where I imagine they uploaded those facial images to wherever their hidden headquarters are. And another white guy was acting sort of as security to the one indigenous spokesperson who was there. And once that indigenous spokesperson sort of whispered in his ear, they determined they weren't going to speak to us. I was pretending to be an independent journalist who was going to sell this story. I was going to auction it off because I knew that they wouldn't talk to me as a rebel news journalist. I knew that since I exposed the Wet'suwet'en First Nation society as a fake First Nation, they would know who I was. And since there was no internet connection out there to verify, I figured it would be more beneficial to act independent. Anyways, they didn't want to talk to me, and it was run by this white guy. It seemed like he was running the show, and I didn't understand it. This white guy was actually from Kenora, Ontario, from what we understand. We're going to dig more into him, and your hypothesis, Ezra, was right. The people running the show there aren't actually the Indian tribal bands that are there. It's people from across Canada that are orchestrating this very small blockade that is blockading a lifeline to the rest of the country, a huge project that, if it doesn't go through, which it will, court has ordered it to go through, it's just a matter of time. If it doesn't go through, Alberta would be really left out in the cold, no pun intended.
I think most of that gas is BC gas, because of course northern BC, there's a lot of fracking, lots of natural gas, but it would be a symbol that you can't, like, if you can't even make a gas pipeline, and the thing is, natural gas, it doesn't spill. You know, you don't have a natural gas spill, so they can't have any of those objections. Natural gas is a low carbon fuel compared to its competitors, coal or oil. So there's no legitimate objection to natural gas other than these people just want to stop industry. Probably at the behest of Canada's competitors overseas. I mean, if they have white operatives based in other provinces that are running these Aboriginal actors, who knows who's pulling the strings behind them? Now, you said something, and I just want to emphasize this for our viewers. We know this is dangerous. We knew it was dangerous, and so we hired a very senior, not like a mall cop, but as you say, former RCMP, former military, a guy who knows his way around. And when you say he was antsy about things, I mean, my journalistic curiosity says, oh shoot, I wish he didn't pull you out of there. I wish we went a little deeper to get more footage. That's easy to say when you didn't have the violence against you. His instincts to leave, although you may have objected to them, could possibly have saved, maybe not your life, but your limb, especially if they're boastfully deploying harmful and malicious traps. I think that's illegal in itself, by the way. If they're bragging about widowmakers and tire bombs or whatever they're called, I don't know the criminal code inside out, but that's surely got to be a crime on top of their other trespassing offenses and their violations of the court orders against them. I think you were in a very dangerous place there, and I'm glad we had security for you. And by the way, I want to invite our viewers to help chip in to cover the security. I'm not going to, well, I will say, okay, I'll say how much the security cost. For security to come to Smithers and drive you in and take care of your safety for the day was $1,500. And I'm not ashamed to say that we spent that much, because God forbid we didn't, something bad would have happened. If people want to chip in, they could go to fakefirstnations.com, because that's what we believe these people are, fakefirstnations.com. Let me ask you, Keean, Why aren't police moving in to take these bad guys out?
Well, they're trying to juggle a lot, Ezra, and these officers. I have the highest respect for these RCMP officers out here in the -40 weather, sitting in a place with very little cell reception, and if any at all. And you know what was interesting, when I left the area, when I left the exclusion zone, they called it, they didn't have any questions outside of, are you able to advise us if anyone needed medical attention? And we told them not to our knowledge. Everyone seemed to be in good health. And they said, okay, thank you. And then we signed out and then we drove away. Their number one priority is making sure everyone is safe, not just their own officers, but also the blockaders, the people acting illegally against a court injunction, even when they are putting dozens of lives at risk out there. The RCMP are still concerned about their safety. So I was surprised that the RCMP were so gracious about it all, and I certainly learned a lot.
Well, listen, I'm glad to hear you speak so well of not only our own security guy who was ex-RCMP, but the RCMP you encountered at the checkpoint. That's great. It's better that we get along with police than what's happened to David Menzies lately, where Toronto Police and York Region Police physically rough him up. So your friendliness is the better of the two alternatives. But I am still curious because a court in British Columbia has ordered those protesters out of the way, and also ordered the police to effect the first order. So it's not just that they're ordering private citizens, they're ordering the cops to do it. And I find this a diminution of the rule of law. And if those weren't, and as you point out, they're not even representative of the local Indian bands. In some cases, they're white activists from out of province. If this were some, I'm just going to make something up, some Ku Klux Klan alt-right putting up crosses and burning them thing, with tire bombs and widowmakers, I can assure you the RCMP Tactical Division would be going in there and extracting them through force. I find it troubling that despite a court order and the breach of the criminal code and the civil law, the RCMP are still letting them just do what they want against the law, blocking the $6 billion pipeline.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question, Ezra. What I'm trying to get at is the people on the ground, the RCMP officers on the ground. I hold them in high regard because they are risking their own safety to protect these people. What I understand is that it's all being controlled from Silver Command, or if not higher. These RCMP officers, maybe they would like to just go in and sort this out right away, get the arrests out of the way. But I think the higher levels of the RCMP are concerned about optics. At the end of the day, these are people who have branded themselves very well. They have the sympathy of the United Nations. They have the sympathy in the ear of Amnesty International. Amnesty International was actually tweeting about this just yesterday. When the world is watching these people and they've created this facade of who they really are and what merits and rights they have to this land, completely fictitiously, of course, that's an international eye that is being put on these low-level RCMP officers who are being controlled by people, 3 levels above their pay grade. Yeah. So it's I just like you, I'm sure. I think that they should just go in and sort this out. I think it would be relatively easy, no casualties whatsoever. But it's being controlled by people above their pay grade, and I don't know why the RCMP, the upper levels of the RCMP, are so cowardly about this, and why they won't just get this sorted out. Because you're right, there's a double standard. If this was anyone other than people who have really branded themselves very well as Indigenous, honest-to-God actors, they would be storming the gates and making those arrests.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of questions about the political stripe of the RCMP. Justin Trudeau appointed the new RCMP commissioner, and I don't know if you saw this image at Canada Day. So Trudeau was under investigation, allegedly, for corrupting the SNC-Lavalin prosecution, and Trudeau literally goes up to the head of the RCMP and gives her a big chest-to-chest hug. It's so bizarre. It's Trudeau's creepy handsiness. But, yeah. I mean, I think that the RCMP is losing its iconic standard of being fair. I mean, it was the RCMP's conduct in the Yukon and other places that earned it its reputation for fairness. Let me ask you about one more thing. You said that one other media outlet was there. I've been reading a lot of media about these fake First Nations, as you so aptly call them. And most of the stories either omit the fact that the actual local Indian bands love this pipeline, they're going to work on this pipeline, they want this pipeline. They either ignore that, or I read a CBC story just today that buried that in the 22nd paragraph down in the story. Like, you had to read this whole massive story before they said, oh, by the way, all the actual Indians here support this pipeline, just these ragamuffins don't. How did you interact at all with the other media that was there? And by the way, who was it?
It was Global News, someone who's been on the ground and has the ear of the protesters. She was very nice to myself and my security. We had a chat on the side of the road after we had left the exclusion zone. We just sort of talked about what was going on, how the RCMP are inevitably going to have to go in eventually. This is sort of an inevitable thing. But Sarah McDonald, I believe is her name. She's much closer to the. She's in the better graces of the blockaders. I'll put it that way. She was able to talk to them and actually stay there and speak with them long term, rather than me just being able to ask a few questions through a truck window. Once everyone sees the video, they'll see I wasn't even allowed to leave my truck. I asked if I could step out and grab some footage, and although I'm sure it was within my rights to do so, it is Crown land held in right for Queen Elizabeth II. It's not their land. It's not even reserve land. They wouldn't let me. They said, no, you must stay in your car, and we had no idea if they had any weaponry on them, so we listened to them. But Sarah McDonald, the Global News reporter, she has much closer footage of them setting up these nice bonfires to stay warm and toasty. It's very, very nice footage. So it was nice, at least, that us, being the second journalists in the entire country to be able to be there, we were able to provide in this coverage the other side of the story already. Sarah is nice enough, but Global News isn't sharing the side of the story that we are, that the 20 out of 20 First Nation bands, legal bands, have actually signed off on that. We have all of their contracts. I've read through them all, and they're all enthusiastically supporting this because the jobs and the money that are coming their way. They know that they need to, they want to accept these jobs and this cash so that they can have sustainable communities when times are tough. And the chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation, the real chiefs, the elected chiefs, and all the other First Nations have been very vocal in their support of this. So I'm honored to be able to share their side of the story.
Well, I remark on the fact that Rebel News is the only media outlet that I'm aware of that is banned from attending the United Nations Global Warming Conferences. Now, that doesn't stop us. We just have to be a little bit more clever how we get in. It's an irritant to me. We overcome it. It's a challenge we overcome. But it's also a feather in our cap as independent journalists. Someone once said journalism is uncovering something that someone doesn't want you to say. Otherwise, it's PR, right? So the fact that the UN keeps us out of their conferences is proof that we're reporting something that they want hidden. I would apply the same thing here. If Sarah McDonald, and I'm sure she's a very nice lady, if she is permitted by these unlawful thugs who are making weapons and threatening you to the point that your senior ex-RCMP security is worried, if Sarah McDonald is allowed to walk about, and by the way, I take it she didn't have a big burly security guard with her, or did she?
She had a cameraman.
A cameraman. Okay, so she didn't have a security guard. So the fact that Global News can send a woman who would physically be quite vulnerable to a physical attack, Global News knows they can send a woman to a violent area and she'll be fine. She'll be given a tour by the local thugs, precisely for the reason that you were not. Because as you outlined, because you're critical of them, they imply or threaten violence. That's why you had to stay in the vehicle. That is extortion. That is a form of assault. Assault is when you feel an imminent risk of force being applied against you. And that in itself shows you can't trust a word Global says, because even if Sarah McDonald is not lying, she's not telling the full truth, because she can't. If she were to say some of the things that you said, she wouldn't be allowed out anymore. She'd be beaten up.
Yeah.
I'm very upset with this story. How do you think it's going to end?
I mean, it is inevitable. The rule of law, I don't think yet is completely broken in Canada. I think that the RCMP will move in when it's once they've done all of their recon work and they've figured out exactly where these widowmakers are and they've ensured the highest level of safety can be attained. I mean, this is maybe it's too pie in the sky. I think that that's how it will work, and I think there will be no casualties at all when it happens.
You know what, Keean, I'm a little bit older than you. So I'm not just talking about Oka, but I know all the ranches in BC, those huge ranches where they had armed standoffs. And those were by actual Indians with firearms. These are, and if the police wouldn't step in there in many of those cases, I don't know. I think the police, especially in BC, especially when you blend Aboriginal issues and eco issues, I think you're right. I think it's higher than the Silver Command. I think it goes right up to Ottawa. I think it goes right up to Brenda Lucki. I think it goes right up to Justin Trudeau and right up to the Premier of BC. I think they are the ones who are saying, don't evict. In fact, if the courts and the regulators permit the pipelines, and you're Justin Trudeau and you hate pipelines, and you're John Horgan and you hate pipelines, what better way to stop it than let these thugs threaten you, and you say, oh, well, we can't do anything because we'd risk a riot. I think that these are political decisions, and I fear that you will not see this pipeline done. You will not see Trans Mountain done. They're giving in to, I'll call them eco-terrorists. You can't build something called the Widowmaker designed to hurt people and not call yourself a terrorist. Last word to you, Keean.
I think you're right, and I'll add one thing to this. I think that people will see the video when it comes out, if it's not out already by the time this airs. But I wouldn't call these people the most prepared people in the bush. We drove right by them. We drove right up to the blockade, and we saw them panic when we appeared. They were completely unprepared for even a journalist to show up. They were freaking out when we showed up, running, trying to gather their things to come towards our vehicle as we approached the blockade, because we didn't even realize that the encampment that they set up was indeed the blockade. So I don't think these people are the most prepared in the bush. I don't think they're the brightest in the bush. But your assessment of them being eco-terrorists, I didn't call them that in my video yesterday because I know I didn't want to overstep my bounds, but you're right. When people are putting widowmakers up, they're called widowmakers for a reason, to intimidate and threaten and perhaps even kill a member of the RCMP or even a journalist like myself to further their political cause. If that's not eco-terrorism, I don't know. I don't know what is. Yeah. So I appreciate everyone tuning into this and our video, and I'll urge them to go to Fake First Nation, singular, fakefirstnation.com, and pitch in a few bucks to help my security, because frankly, it's not just it's not just the security, the $1,500 security. It's the flight out here. It's the hotel that I'm sitting in right now. A lot of work goes into getting these videos out, and I think they're worthwhile, and hopefully people agree.
Yeah, well, I certainly think it's money well spent. Because this is one of the stories that you can't report unless you're there. Unless you're there. And the fact that you were only the one of two journalists to get there, I'm very proud that Rebel sent you there. We spent $1,500 on your security, and I'm glad we did. And I'm glad he pulled you out when he did, because I would not want to, I would not want the alternative. We flew you out there, the hotels. I think altogether the total cost of your trip to BC is probably going to be close to $3,000 once everything's added up. And we do need the help. That's a lot of money to spend for a couple of videos. As people know, YouTube does not monetize most of our videos. We might make $50 in YouTube ads, so folks can chip in at fakefirstnation.com. I'd be grateful. Keean, I'm glad you're okay. Great reporting. If you can do some streeters, which is talking to regular folks on the street, I know it's cold out there, I'd like to get what they think of these ragamuffins up there. I bet they don't like it. I bet they don't like these out-of-town troublemakers coming in to mess things up. I bet they don't like all the delays in their work.
My guess is you're right, and I'll certainly try to do that. My flight was canceled, actually, Ezra. It was so cold out here, the plane couldn't leave the tarmac. So hopefully it warms up by the evening or the afternoon, and I can get out of here. But in the meantime, that's absolutely what I will do. Maybe I can find a bar where I could speak to people.
A bar, that's right. You can stay warm. You can have a shot of brandy or something, and then you can go around and interview people. Isn't that crazy that the plane was there, but it was just too cold to take off? I believe it. Well, and I'm glad those protesters are enjoying a little bit of the northern BC winter. Thanks, Keean. I really enjoyed this talk. It went longer than I thought, but I really think this is important journalism, that if we weren't doing it, no one else would. So keep it up out there.
Thanks, Ezra.
All right, there you have it. Keean Bexte, our roving reporter, joining us from Smithers, BC. It's a bit of a journey to get to Smithers, and of course we had to get his security up there too, and I'm so glad we did. Wouldn't you agree with me on that? That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show, which is a show I do every day. I do a monologue, interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at premium.rebelnews.com.